Hey, Fatty, I still remember the first time I attempted to ride a bike. And I'm not just talking like a mountain bike or something recent. I'm talking about the very first time I got on a bike. And this is a long time ago. It was Christmas Day. I'm not going to say the year. I'd gotten a blue Raleigh for Christmas. I was in front of my house, ready to roll. My dad gave me a push, and I tried to pedal. Then gravity took over, and I went straight to the ground. The pavement, in fact. Not a great start to a life of riding bikes. Two notable pieces of equipment were missing that morning: training wheels and a helmet.
Wow. It's notable that you can remember that. I mean, it obviously made an impression, but I mean, not so different from the way a lot of us rode back then. We were just flying around on our bikes, no helmets at all. And when I say back then, Hadi and I, we were riding, there was not even such a thing as mountain bikes back then. And helmets, rarely seen or used. Of course, that's all changed now. If you are teaching a little one to ride, try something that will help them so that, like Hadi, unlike Hadi, they don't wind up on the ground. And for sure, try a helmet. And we say, get a laser helmet.
Yeah, even though I bashed my head several times as a bike riding kid, I am somehow smart enough now to wear a helmet, and that helmet is a laser. And for kids, Laser has a great selection. They have 4 models, and each model comes in multiple colors or designs, so your young peddler is bound to find something that fits their head and their eye.
Yeah, 2 of the kids' models, the Nuts and the Peanut, come with Kinetic Core. Kinetic Core is laser technology that reduces the twisting forces that can occur in a fall, and all 4 models are priced at under $60.
Of course, price is not the point here. Protection is, and that is what Laser is very good at. Laser consistently gets the highest marks from Virginia Tech's helmet testing lab, no matter what level of helmet you are in the market for. So get those kids riding. Get them training wheels if needed, and for sure get them a helmet. Laser is a Shimano partner, and you can find their lineup at lasersport.us. And thanks to Shimano for being a title sponsor of this show.
3, 2,
1. Leadville, the podcast for the 100-mile mountain bike race presented by Shimano. It's Season 6, Episode 11 of the show that breaks down, builds up, gets you ready, and freaks you out for the highest, hardest one-day mountain bike race in the country. I am Michael Houghton, Hadi to Most.
And I'm Fatty, and one of the things we take a lot of pride in is that in this show, we always try to keep in mind the riders that start near the back or somewhere in the middle of the field of the Leadville Trail 100. Despite the wave starts, the White Corral is definitely not an easy place to kick off the race. There are thousands of riders in front of you. There's, of course, the anxiety that we all feel at the starting line. There's uncertainty, and there is a big question hanging over most people in the White Corral, and that is, can I get back to 6th and Harrison in time to get a buckle? In this episode, we're going to take a look at what the numbers say about that question. How have others fared in their attempts to reach that big or small buckle?
And to answer that question, we have on the show 2 people who are really good with data and math. That means it's not us, Fatty. It's 2 really smart guys. Hopefully they can help you with the odds of making it from the White Corral back to 6th and Harrison.
Yahoo!
What is a good strategy for staying ahead of the cutoff times?
What do the experts say about sleeping effectively at altitude, and what do you each do?
For Leadville, hardtail or full suspension?
Yeah, good question.
We're now at what rapidly is becoming my favorite recurring segment this season, the Leadville Frequently Asked Questions, also known as LFAQ. If you've got a question, we will try our best to answer. No guarantees whether it's going to be right.
Right. Whether we are correct is a completely different matter here, but this is an interesting one, Fatty, and it comes via our Leadville Slack channel. A link to join is over at leadville.fm/Slack. Friend of the pod, Chris Smith, has this question. He says, we get laser focus on the marquee climbs at Leadville, like Columbine, Powerline, Sugarloaf, Keevens, but 40% of the climbing isn't one of those climbs. So he asks, Chris does, what are the climbs we don't think about but should?
I have a ridiculous number of answers to this question, Hadi. The obvious one is the Boulevard, but we talked about that one already. Up until a couple of years ago, I would have said Clavicle Hill inbound because that is a nasty little hike-a-bike, but it's not even part of the course anymore. There is a super steep 200-foot long grunt of a climb that catches me off guard every year right after Pipeline outbound. But the climb, I think, is the true unsung villain in this race, is right after you go through Twin Lakes Dam aid station outbound. You know what it is, Hadi. You've just gone through the highest energy location of the whole race, the Twin Lake Dam, and you've had a little flat for a moment, maybe taking a quick break, eaten something, and then bam, mile 41 to mile 41.7 is a 300-foot long climb nobody talks about, and it is tough. It is steep, it is choppy and rocky, and there is a good chance that you are going to have a lot of passing happening right there because of that aid station shuffle effect. But the first part isn't even what I'm going to call this unsung villain in this climb. It's right before you top out. The trail goes to double track, and then there is one good line, there is one not so good line, and for about 50 feet, you've got a 20-degree punch to the gut. If you're in a Congo line at this point, and there is a good chance you will be because racers get bunched up on climbs after the aid stations, the odds are someone ahead of you is not going to clean that final 50 feet and is going to need to put a foot down. If you are just staring at the next racer's wheel, you are going to get caught in a domino effect, and you're going to have to stop and probably hike until you get to the top of that little climb. Here's my solution. Be ready for that likelihood and move over to the less populated, worse line, be in a nice low gear, look ahead, keep your eyes up, and ride it out. How about you, Hadi? What's your pick for an unsung villain in this race?
Well, I love yours. That little puncher coming off the dam is a real surprise.
Mm-hmm.
And it's especially tough if you stop for a feed on the dam, had all that lactate pull up in your legs, and you try to get going again. Just yuck. It's just very hard. I also agree with you on Clavicle Hill, but that's not so much a climb as it is an obstacle, you know?
Yeah.
The climb out of the hole at the Columbine turnaround is now gone. That would have been a good one, I think, as is the single track inbound. That was actually a pretty tough climb going back home. So those are out. I'm pretty sure most listeners are tired of me whining about the Turquoise Lake pavement climb back to Carter 8 since I'm terrible, though, at making up my mind here. I'm going to go with two, one outbound and one in, one old and one new. Outbound, it's the section right after the single track to just before you hit Twin Lakes. 2.7 miles, steady grade, but the kick in the butt here, the washboards. The surface makes this an overlooked section, and a terrible one at that, a vibrating torture of a climb. In your head, you're thinking, I'm almost at Twin Lakes, while your arms, shoulders, and back are getting a workout going up this thing. And then inbound, I'm going to give it to the single track workaround section, specifically the part after you turn off the pavement. This is County Road 136. Now, I've not raced this section, but I did ride it last year, and a couple things impressed. First, it was soft to sandy dirt. The rolling was just slow. Second, it was exposed, so the sun is beating down on you in this section. It's not much on paper, 1.3 miles from the pavement to the pipeline section, and a steady, sub 5% grade, but this is just kind of a slog, and your sunscreen will certainly be tested in this section. Thanks again, everyone, for those LFAX questions, and keep them coming. This is going to be a segment for the rest of the season as far as we can see right now. We don't care what kind of rider you are or have been. We want all of you just to keep this in mind. Before you start your glorious Leadville out and back, please have your nutrition and hydration dialed. Fatty, we could throw out a lot of the stuff we talk about on this show and people would be fine. But the one thing that cannot be ignored is the fuel it takes to conquer this thing.
Yep, it is an eating contest disguised as a race. We've said it a million times. And all of the advice we give and our experts dole out, I would say the fueling question is the most important, and honestly, it is the easiest to solve. You just go to the feed. Most of the answers are right there at thefeed.com. We can and have brought on all kinds of guests to tell you about calculating your fuel needs, figuring out your sweat rates, understanding the importance of sodium, but ultimately you've got to get all of that figured out, and you got to put it to test in the field.
Yeah, all that theory on fueling and hydration is fine and dandy, but your gut and my gut and Fatty's gut, that is, are different places. And while I may be able to survive a day around Leadville on Stroop waffles and Scratch sports drink, your GI tract may prefer Goo energy gels and Morton drink mix. All of that stuff is available at the feed, but the mixing and matching is something you're going to have to do.
Yeah, and the feed is the best place to get the nutrition you're going to train and race with. You get it easily, you get it automatically, you get it at a great price. The feed is the largest online marketplace for athletes to shop sports nutrition, high performance supplements, and recovery gear. Everything you need to make your workout really great.
Claim your $80 in annual credit at thefeed.com/Leadville. Register your email, verify your phone number, then spend your first feed credit of $20 right away.
Hottie, we have talked about dropper posts a few times before. I'm going to make it official right now. This year, I am actually going to be riding with the dropper post. Specifically, I am racing with Envy's G Series dropper post. I've been doing all of my training rides with this post. And honestly, and I mean this, I am never going to ride a mountain bike without a dropper ever again.
Yeah, it's a good choice. The G-Series dropper was built with a lightweight gravel bike in mind, but our friends at Envy have given it a thumbs up for the Leadville 100 as well. The inverted design sheds mud, which can matter on rainy days at 12,000 feet.
Which is a possibility. And until I started riding with this post really regularly, I have one both on my geared bike and my single speed. I like it that much. I didn't really understand the primary benefit for me of a dropper or other endurance racers is a change in position on descents. Sitting just a little bit lower, having your legs bent at a little bit different angle for a couple of minutes just feels good. It helps a lot with recovery for the next big climb. The lower center of gravity is honestly almost a secondary benefit for me.
The G-Series dropper doesn't have a huge amount of drop, 40 millimeters, but frankly, you don't need a huge amount of drop on the Leadville course or most cross-country trails for that matter. A little goes a long way.
Yeah. What I need is a change in the lower center of gravity, a change in seating position, lightweight in that dropper post, and the confidence I get from the premium engineering and the reliability that comes with Envy. Plus, with the inverted design, my saddlebag hangs on the rails without ever bumping against anything else. It's great.
If you've been thinking of getting a little lower and more comfortable on your descent from 12,500 feet, check out the Envy G-Series dropper post at Envy. That's ENVE.com. Days after the 2022 Leadville Trail 100 ended, we started talking with our guests in this episode about the feature you're going to hear. The discussion centered around the probability of success when starting from the White Corral. Are the people starting at the back getting every opportunity to succeed, and how well are they doing?
Yeah, we know that this weighs on the minds of just about everyone who starts in those back groups, except for the possibility of Ty Hall, who has assigned himself to the back of the race in the name of charity every year, but he is a corner case. The rest of the racers in the White Corral are less confident about what is possible. We hope this episode and our guests can help you understand what has been done and what can be done from the back of the Leadville Trail 100.
All right, we want to welcome to the show, not one but two guests this time, Fatty. Yes, we're doing math in this episode, so, you and I have no business here. We're just going to bring in two guests to help us do all the computations and most notably, figure out what's going on from the White Corral and what are the chances from the White Corral, what are the odds of making it. So we brought two people in here, both with great skills in this area. First and foremost, Jeff Dieffenbach. You folks may recognize the name. He's our Slack channel. I would call him moderator and inventor and the guy that really keeps the Slack channel going. He's on there quite a bit. Jeff is a great Leadville friend, and he has the credentials to match what we're trying to cover here today. He holds 2 master's degrees from MIT, one in materials engineering, one in technology and policy, and he's also on staff there in a non-faculty position at MIT in the mechanical engineering department. And as Jeff says, I think in spreadsheets, which it's all foreign to me, Jeff. I have no idea what that means. You think in spreadsheets. That's pretty cool. He has Leadville experience, like we said, 8 years combined, volunteering, racing, crewing, and he's in the stage race for this year. So we'll see Jeff in Leadville. Our second guest is Mark Wolfgang. Now, you'll remember Mark from this season, in fact, episode 4, that comeback episode we did. Mark was showing signs of rhabdomyolysis during the race, and he actually had to pull out, but he went back to Leadville and finished his ride. Really cool story there. Mark is what they call a penetration tester, and more commonly known as a professional hacker. He's an author and a technology entrepreneur. And he's also the inventor of the Leadville Race Series Time Predictor. Maybe some of you folks have used that to try to figure out what your time might be at Leadville or at other races. He has 74 official miles at Leadville, an official in quotation marks, a Silver Rush 50, a stage race, and a camp under his belt buckle. And he plans to do the 50 and the 100 this year. So thank you both for coming on the show. Again, like I said, our focus is to put some numbers behind this White Corral situation. We're going to talk about some other stuff too. What are the chances from White? What are the odds, if you will, from about having a successful day from the White Corral? Now, I want to first go to a quote regarding odds from the great Han Solo. And Han said, "Never tell me the odds," right? He said that when C-3PO said, "Sir, the possibility of successfully navigating an asteroid field is approximately 3,720 to 1. And what did Han say? Say it with me, everybody. Never tell me the odds. Which is exactly what we're going to try to do here today. So let's first, Fatty, start by looking at a discussion that began on the Slack channel. And I think I saw, I don't know if it was a discussion or just complaining on the Facebook participants page about big buckling from the White Corral. Can it be done? And Jeff, I guess the short answer is yes, but what does the math tell us about big buckling from the White Corral?
Well, don't tell me the odds, because they aren't great. This is based on 2022. 4 men made it, and 1 woman made it, and those were respectively 1.5% and 1.8% of the time.
I want to know about also, whether there is a corresponding, I guess, poor odds for people who are hoping for a sub 12. I mean, are you more likely or less likely to do a sub 12 from the White Corral?
You're not as likely as the race at a whole to go sub 13 or sub 12 from the White Corral. And I think we should expect that, right? Because we know the silver and the gold and the red and the green are fast. You don't get there any other way. We just don't know about a lot of people in white. Sure, there are fast people there, but there are a lot of people there because qualifications that they didn't earn them a faster corral. They're not faster people. So they're lower odds, but they aren't dramatically lower odds. For instance, 81% of the men go sub 13 overall, and 71% of the men go sub 13 from the White Corral.
So are you saying that it's correlation without causation is kind of what I'm hearing, right?
Well, I think there is a causation effect in that slower people are placed in the White Corral, and that is indicative of their finish times. But within the White Corral, we can break it down into White 1 versus White 2 and 3. White 2 and 3 this past year started together at the same time. So let's consider them a group together. You get faster, you're more likely to sub 13, sub 12, or sub 9 from White 1 than you are from White 2 and 3. And I think that's because people follow the directions. If you're a faster white rider, get up to Corral 1, White 1, and start there. If maybe you're not quite so fast, you can manage from 2 and 3. So in that sense there, it's more self-fulfilling prophecy than causation.
Which is not what we were told exactly, Fatty, when we went to the start line this year. Is like a lot of people, it was an alarm clock race. Like they just wanted to be up there as soon as they could and grab a spot at the front of White in White 1. But it looks like, based on the math, Jeff, that those folks that did get up early were also the faster riders, or were fast enough riders to either get a silver or a big buckle. So like any good math teacher will say, okay, those are the answers. Show me your math. Like, how did you get there? So how did you arrive at these numbers?
So Mark's going to laugh at this a little bit, given the data that he's got on the system. I went through racer by racer and counted. So I looked starting at the last person. Well, first of all, we know the total who started, and then I'll look at the person closest to sub 13, click in, look at their start time. That tells me their corral, and repeat another 1,300 or so times. And from that, I can tell exactly what time band different percentages of riders finished. One thing that I found was a little bit interesting is the women split themselves almost equally between white 1 and white 2 and 3, whereas the men didn't. The majority of the men went to white 2 and 3, which I think we'd expect because it's 2 of the 3 corrals. So I don't know if that's the women being more assertive or just the smaller numbers that happen to split out that way.
Let's look at another part of White Corral, Jeff, and that is the man who makes it his business to go to the White Corral and pass people. That's Ty Hall. Now, Ty has a long record of racing from White, and it's very good, except for 2021, where he scored a 906, and that was mostly due to a mechanical issue. But ever since he's been racing from White, whether it's been corrals or wave starts or not, I mean, he's consistently being 8.5 hour guy. And in fact, if you look previous to his days from racing from White, he's always been right around that time. Can we read anything at all and apply it to what we do, us citizen racers, at all by looking at what Ty Hall is able to do from White?
I could look at Ty Hall, but not for very long because he'd be riding away from me. I think that's just one fast guy. In fact, I did not include him in my data because I don't view him as a representative White Corral racer. So there were, in fact, 5 men who finished sub 9 from the White Corral, he being the 5th, but not part of my data set.
Both of you have, I mean, Mark, you have finished the race not as, on the official day, but when you did the solo effort, the time trial, what was how long did it take you to do that?
12 hours, something.
Okay, right around 12 hours. And Jeff, the time you did the Leadville 100, you did it in around 11 and a half hours.
Yep.
So, right. So, I mean, both of you are kind of in that pack, right? The finisher pack, the people who make up the heart of this race, really. Where would you seed yourselves? And you just from that perspective, who know the numbers, but also know, what your finish time might be. Where would you put yourselves this year?
So the year I did it, I got a little bit of a backdoor upgrade to the Orange Corral and probably finished bluish. I'm not a great climber, and at the time I was less of a descender than I am now. And I'm not a young man anymore. And blue's probably about right, but I know there are faster people behind me in white.
Yeah, I started off in the purple corral. That was based off my stage race time. I would be happy with blue probably just because I could qualify for purple. Maybe my ego and the competitive drive, I need to be in blue, not around such fast people, because just a personal limitation, and maybe I need to hold myself back a little.
So, Jeff, to wrap this up about White, if a racer comes up to you and they say, Jeff, I'm in White, I want to get the best time I can out there, I feel like I'm in good shape, what are my odds?
So, first of all, I don't think it matters whether you do white 1 or white 2, 3, because you're you, and you're not going to be held up by bottlenecks on Kevins. And that's probably the biggest thing that wave starts have done to address challenges faced by the White Corral. So you want to get sub 13, 71% of men and 51% of women do it. You want to get sub 12, 58% of men and 33% of women. You want to get sub 9, don't tell me the odds.
Because they are low, but I mean, some of that goes back to the fact that in White, you are going to have a large number of folks who are first timers or who have very little experience in mountain biking or endurance sports at all. And so your odds of finding at least sub 9 riders in that group are going to be pretty low. I mean, I think that's some of what we should expect out of white as far as the numbers are concerned.
That's what I was thinking. The big buckle from the White Corral is, I think, a really fringe case. We're talking about somebody that is very fast, that hasn't done any qualifiers, that has no other corral position. And I think that is such a fringe case. And the question would be, is it possible? And I think we've proven that it is possible if you are very fast like Ty Hall, or you can do it, right? The data may not necessarily give you great odds, but I don't think that's entirely truthful either, because how many people that are really, really fast do we see come out of nowhere, enter the White Corral and big buckle? I think it's a fringe case.
Yeah. And do we know if the success rate has, whether that be a small buckle, whether it be finishing, small buckle, big buckle, has gotten better since the wave starts have started?
I haven't looked at that, but that'd be a fun analysis to do, and really would answer the question of, were bottlenecks all in people's heads or actually affecting their times?
And I guess that's why I looked at Ty Hall just as I get it, Ty Hall's a fast dude, but clearly the bottlenecks did not affect him. He didn't need the wave starts. He's that good. And some of it just comes down to either you can pass people or you can't, right? And that's a skill, and Ty Hall clearly has it.
I said the fringe case. I think the bigger question that applies to more people is, can I finish? Can I even get a buckle? Can I get a small buckle? Can I finish within 12 hours from the White Corral? So what did we say the odds of that are, Jeff?
So sub 13, 50 to 70% women versus men. Not bad, right? If you are somebody, this is your first time in the race. It's not an easy race, right? It's supposed to be hard. We saw that from the ground up participants. And so I don't find those to be depressing numbers. 1 and 2 or a little bit better. Hey, I'll take my chances with that.
And let's face it, anybody can enter the race, right? With limited training or zero odds of finishing the race. So, what was the one thing that we learned in statistics? Something like you can make the number say anything you want, and
stats don't lie, but liars use stats, something like that.
Something like that.
One thing from the conversations that we've had with racers and with Lifetime is that the self-seeding hasn't been a perfect success, that there has been some bottlenecking. So knowing that there are, pretty reasonable odds of finishing, but also knowing that there is some kind of bottlenecking that is still happening, even with the three corrals. As 11 and a half, 12-hour finishers, what would you do to make this race help your odds?
Here's a thought. This is actually maybe back for the Leadville race series. Maybe they could say, we're going to ask you for Strava if you'd like to be seeded within white, and maybe using Mark's race predictor kind of algorithm, right? We know something about how strong a rider they are based on Strava. And if you don't want to volunteer that, fine. You don't have to, and you just go in the random part of white. But maybe there's a way to somewhat seed people within white. If I'm doing it as a racer, I think now with wave starts, it's on me to be prepared. It's on me to take in my 100 grams of carbs, 250 calories an hour to get to the finish line, to know how to fix a mechanical, to know how to dress in the bad weather, because I can't blame it on crowds anymore.
Oh, you still can.
No, you can't.
I will, though. So.
My toolbox of excuses is as big as anybody's, but I try to bring them out sparingly.
I think the race series has a great way of, seeding people in the corrals. For example, I was a brand new racer. I had done none of the races in the series. I came in and did the Silver Rush, and I was seeded based on that one. So I don't really see how anybody can come into a brand new series where the race organization doesn't know you, doesn't know your capabilities, and really complain about getting stuck in the White Corral. I think, everybody has a shot. A very capable racer has a shot of finishing within 12 hours from the White Corral. So it's really on us to prove ourselves, I would think. to the organization.
Oh, but they do complain, and that's one of the reasons we started this discussion. There was a little bit of grumbling about what was possible from white, and that's why we started doing the math. It turns out, I think what Jeff was able to discover, and Mark, some of your numbers show too, is that the possibilities are all right there. And if you are a very good racer, a fast person who just has no other way of moving up, absolutely, gold buckle is within your reach from white, especially now that their wave starts, and certainly finishing the races is possible from white. That's for sure. So we've mentioned the race predictor here a couple of times. Let's get into that real quick because it seems like a neat tool people might be able to use to figure out what they can do, despite what the odds may or may not say. And Mark, you came up with the race predictor. Tell us, what is that? What can it do? What can't it tell me?
The race predictor website was born out of my and my partner Sarah's desire just to, as new racers to the organization and new mountain bike racers, we just wanted an idea. We had no idea how we might fare in the 105-mile mountain bike race. We had raced Silver Rush 50, and Sarah won her age group, and she was browsing the results when we were in bed trying to go to sleep, but we couldn't go to sleep because we were so jacked. And she was saying, okay, let's look at the second place girl and the third place girl and the fourth place girl. And now let me go to Athlinks and see if they finished the 100. Oh, wow, this girl did it in 10 something. Okay, cool. Maybe I can do it in 10 something. And I was, with my analytical brain, I was like, I can tell you, I can search the entire data set if I can grab the data set, and I can figure this out. And of course, I wanted to know how well I could do and what I might be able to expect. Just an idea. Is it just something within 30 minutes? I came up with this concept and hired a developer to build this proof of concept website for me. First job was to retrieve all the race results from all the races, aggregate all this data, and then start to do some analysis. And the formula for determining a prediction is pretty simple. It's that we look at all the racers that have done any two of the Leadville Race Series races. So, for example, we take a look at all the finishers of the Silver Rush 50 that have also done the LT 100, and we see how they did. How much longer did it take them to do the 100 compared to the 50? We look at all, for 2022, there were 188 people that did both races. We do a median of all of their multipliers, and we determined that it takes 1.8 times longer to do the 100 than it does the 50. So then we can come up with this multiplier for every single race combination, so that if I did the Silver Rush 50 and I want to do Wilmington Whiteface, I can make a reasonable prediction of what my time might be, just so I can have some kind of expectation.
So there's a multiplier attached to each race, right? As long as you have a result from that race.
Correct.
You can use a multiplier from another race to figure out what you're going to do. You got to have one result, though, right?
You do. We need something to base your a time off of. And so anybody can go to this website, www.ltracepredictor.com, and if they have done one Lifetime Series race, they can predict their time for all of the other races. So we use their base race, their one race that they completed, and we even have a field in. So if they had a mechanical and they know they wasted 20 minutes on the side of the road fixing something, they can adjust that base race time to get a more accurate prediction.
I imagine there are some races that have more data and therefore more, I guess, a better chance of predicting if you did this race, how you would do at that race. And of course, by that race, I almost always mean the Leadville 100. So which races is it most helpful to have done in order to do a prediction of your possible Leadville 100 time?
That would be the Silver Rush 50. That is the most accurate race pairing. Like I said, 188 people did both races last year. So that's a pretty sizable data set. What we're trying to do is eliminate. So let's say, Eldon Fatty had a really bad day at the Silver Rush 50, but he did very well. I don't think so. He did very well at the 100. So his multiplier might have taken him 2 times the Silver Rush 50 time to do the 100 because he had a really bad day. So we don't want to just take a look at your results. We want to take a look at all 188 people's results and come up with a more accurate predictor. So, in analyzing the results, it turns out the predictor really nailed a lot of people's time. My partner, Sarah, did a prediction based off of the stage race, and the predictor had her, it was only a minute off. We nailed right on the money a few people. I posted on the Facebook participants page asking people if they had used it and what the results were. And 3 or 4 people, it nailed it within the minute. So I think you can reasonably expect 20 plus or minus 20 minutes. I think that should be our expectation. And I am by no means a data scientist. We're not predicting the exact precise time that the rocket is going to land on the moon. There are a lot of variables, and you're not a machine. Racers aren't machines. So it's just a tool that you can use to get some idea of where you'll come.
The Leadville Silver Rush 50, it has had different courses at different times. Do you factor that in when doing the prediction?
Yes and no. It doesn't really matter. We're just looking. The multiplier for different years will be different.
So it takes that into account. Does it take into account that I'm about 20 pounds heavier than when I most recently raced the Leadville 100? Can I add that in somehow?
Not yet. I have thought of features where the user could upload their weight, the weight of the bike, many other things, watts per kilo. There's all kinds of possibilities that we could do. Pulling in their Strava data to look at their power profile, all kinds of things. But no, we're kind of going off limited information. And the one thing, when the website generates predictions without the athlete's input, that's a totally blind prediction. I have no idea if Jeff had a flat and he was or he was sitting in the aid station like me for 45 minutes.
So the race predictor has a website, right? What's the URL on the website if people want to find it?
It's www.ltracepredictor.com.
Straightforward. I like that. Okay, folks, if you want to figure out, or at least get an idea, can't figure it out, how fast you might be at the LT100 or some other race, and you've got a result from the LRS, from the Leadville Race Series, then that's a place to start. And then you work from there. Then you try to improve on the time. And then you use Jeff's math to figure out whether or not you can buckle from white, which we say you can. Never mind them. Don't tell me the odds. You can do it. Fatty, I think we're onto something with that look good, feel good, race good mantra we came up with a few episodes ago. I mean, we have a lot of reasons to love DNA Cycling and their fantastic custom clothing, but it really comes down to that. I mean, you're not wearing your kit for someone else. You're wearing it for you.
Yeah, and even if you have a few sponsors that you'd like to put on your kit, which would put you in a semi-pro situation anyway, where you're wearing your kit for someone else, ultimately, you've got to like how it looks, how it fits, and how it feels. Well, that is DNA in a nutshell. I've been with this company for a long time and have thrown all kinds of design requests and ideas their way. And every time, whether it was for my Old Fat Cyclist blog or a kit for this podcast, DNA is delivered in spades. They've given us great bike clothing that makes me ready to race or ride and, proud of how I look.
We are really buried in the numbers on this show. Like, this is a math episode, talking about the odds of success, the chances of buckling, and all that. But when it comes to clothing, it's really hard to put a performance number on that, right? I mean, it's just subjective, clothing is. It's in the eyes of the beholder, if you will. But we can say this about clothing and about DNA. Chances are high, very high, that you will like what you see from DNA. And that, in turn, will make you feel good and confident as you take the line at the Leadville Trail 100.
Yeah, so as you're sizing up your Leadville goal and doing your splits and calculating your odds, don't forget your frame of mind. Like Hadi has said, food is mood. Now we're going to add to that. So is your kit. We just need some kind of cool rhyme for that, Hadi. We haven't got there yet. But while we work on it, you work on your custom design by going to dnacycling.com. Be sure to tell them the Leadville podcast sent you.
All right, back now with Jeff and Mark and their math. We have 2 more things to look at, the cutoffs and a course comparison, both by the numbers. Jeff, let's get back to you. You did another great article, by the way. Jeff wrote an article on the White Corral, should we call it dilemma, question? He wrote an article on that. He also wrote something I found very interesting on the cutoff. And we're talking about the cutoff at Twin Lakes and the folks that barely made the cutoff and barely missed the cutoff and the outcomes. Jeff, what did you find out about these people who are on the brink of success and failure?
Yeah, when I volunteered in 2014, I was at Twin Lakes Outbound, and it was really interesting to see the people who were crushed getting their band. At that time, I think it was a wristband taken away versus relieved to get it taken away. But I wanted to look at what happens to those people who just missed it. How much of a beef do they have for getting pulled? And it turns out if you look at the people who just make it, you can look at the likelihood that they are going to go sub 13. And I forget the total number that I looked at, but those who were reasonably close, it was maybe 20 people who just made that cutoff and were allowed to continue. 40% of them came in sub 13. So the people I think do have a beef, but there's got to be a cutoff somewhere. And you live by the rules. I was looking, one of the guys I came across from Sweden, I think it was last year, finished in 12:02. That is 12 hours and 2 seconds. That's a long way to come to miss a buckle by 2 seconds. But I'd like to think if I was in that position, I'd say, look, I didn't make 11:59.59, and that's on me. So again, you can certainly get a sub 13. It's pretty hard to sub 12 if you just make that cutoff. The last 25 people who made it through all finished either sub 13 or not at all. The next one, the 26th one through, came in as he ended up doing white buckling. And I think he did that because he was a strong rider. You can look at his different time cuts. He was pretty far up at the first time cut and then way down at the second one. So he probably mechanicaled or crashed or had some sort of bonk and recovered because he then slowly rose up through the ranks. But I think it's going to take a pretty special rider to just make that cutoff and buckle.
And likely what's going on for the people who barely miss, but could have a realistic shot of making it if they were allowed through, are those folks who did have problems early on and then decided I'm going to try and catch my ghost, if you will. I catch the person I'm supposed to be. And they're making great time at doing that, but then they barely miss. Those folks really have an argument. Like, I was giving it all I had, and if they let me through, I know I can make it. And that's probably the case. For the people who are just continually falling back as the day progresses, as they get closer to Twin Lakes, then legitimately I think the race can say, now you should be pulled because you're just getting slower as time passes on here.
That's a great thought, because what you could do is allow gold, silver, red, and green that just miss through, knowing that they're fast, but not the subsequent corrals. You might not be Mr. or Ms. Popularity if you were the one making the decision that way, but that at least is some signal of, hey, I'm behind because something happened, not I'm behind because I'm just not a fast enough racer.
I think they should have an appeals board right there. A jury of 9 of your peers, and state your case. You get a quick thumbs up or thumbs down, and you're honestly though,
Fatty famously in one of the movies, there's a woman who comes in, they cut her band, and she starts, she's pretty upset, and she starts pleading, I want to see my chip time. I want to see my chip time. Now, chip time doesn't matter at the cutoffs. It's still time of day. Now, they've changed the time of day to 6:50 a.m. at Twin Lakes outbound because of wave starts. So it's not chip time that matters. It's time of day. That's all they're concerned about here. It's daylight hours and getting people off the course in a timely fashion. But again, like Jeff, I think, pointed out with the math here is that, some people do have trouble early on and recover, but not quite enough to get through. Like whatever mistake they made or whatever mishap they had was so big, they just had, no chance despite their best efforts, despite maybe even picking up their pace to get through and to move on. And it's not a large number of people. I mean, Jeff didn't find a huge number of people here, but there are a few people that if Fatty's appeals board were to show up, they would have a legitimate case. Well, Fatty, we also gave Jeff a last-second assignment here because, you and I have been very interested in the new course versus old course. And it's not so much new versus old, but we've had changes to the course recently. And now, anecdotally, during interviews, Fatty, you and I have, deduced that it's a wash. Like the changes they made a couple years ago, and we're talking about, top of Columbine, that long dip into the gully down there is no longer gone. You just turn around at the peak and come back, and they've cut off the private property area in between Twin Lakes Alternate and the dam itself. And of course, you don't do the single track coming home. Those are the changes, and we've been wondering, which is the faster course, the one that we've been on for years or this new one. So we gave Jeff that assignment vis-a-vis the math. Jeff, which is faster? Is either faster, or are we running the same thing?
I think one of them's faster, and I'll tell you how I got there. I looked at 2022 and 2021, the two runnings that we have on the new course, what I'll call the new course, compared to 19 and 18, which I'll call the old course. So we've got roughly the same number of riders in the same era of technology and nutrition and all of that. If you think about it, the course, the weather, and the strength of the field are probably the three biggest variables that affect the time that people finish. And I needed to factor out the weather and the strength of field so we could just hone in on what the course is doing. As it happens, the weather across those 4 years wasn't dramatically different. There was a hotter day and a cooler day in both of the groupings. It's a bit windier in the old course grouping, 18 and 19, but we have some reasonable comparability there. Big difference in strength of field last year when we had the lifetime athletes, the pros, but the results can be filtered for the pros. The challenge that introduces is that some of the pros who used to race and were part of the overall field, the Howard Gratzes and the Payson McKelvins who'd raced it in years before now are pulled out of the general population field. And so in effect, the 2022 field looks weaker because it's got none of the pros at the top end. So I figured out how to adjust for that as well. Now, what you still don't know, though, is are things really apples to apples anymore? But you can look at three interesting segments of the course. The first one is to Twin Lakes out. That's identical both years.
The first 40 miles. Mm-hmm.
The first 40 miles is the same in both groupings, new and old. The second segment is from Twin Lakes out to Pipeline in. And I'm defining segments by the cutoffs or the timing mats that we have that populate the Athlinks database. So we're not looking at Strava or something else. We're looking at the official times based on chips.
And that's where all the change is.
All the changes are in that second segment, all three of those changes. And then from Pipeline inbound back to the finish, it's identical, new and old. And so what I can do is create a virtual rider in all three of those races. And I created a virtual rider by averaging the 10th percentile, 25th percentile, 50th percentile, 75th percentile, and 90th percentile crossers of each of those timing mats. And then I average them so that I'm getting an average of fast people and median people and slow people. And then I can compare them in the different segments. And so what we would predict is segment 1 should be the same old course and new course, same time. And segment 3 should be the same time. And it turns out they are within 0.5%, which I think is within the variability of rider strength and slight weather differences. But the real magic is in that second segment. And it turns out that second segment is about 2% slower on the new course. What's interesting, though, and that translates to a 0.7% slower overall race. So if you're a median racer who's going to finish in 10:15, you're going to add about 4.5 minutes to your time because you're racing the new course compared to if you'd been racing the old course. Or conversely, if you did it last year in 10:15, you probably would have been 10:10 or thereabouts had you been racing it on the old course. And what's happening is we've added distance too, right? So we added 1.5% distance to go from 103.7 to 105.3 miles, but we only added 0.7% in time. So the added distance is not hard distance, but it is added distance, and that translates into a slightly slower course.
That tracks to my gut. obviously, the longer stuff in there is a little bit easier, right? There is a portion that is flat on wide dirt road that didn't used to be there. And the part that got shorter is in fact, is about what, 3/4 of a mile between out and back that is above 12,500 feet. Removing that is a big deal, even though that's not the steepest part of Columbine. Anytime you're over that altitude, it is going to be a lot rougher. I know that I feel that personally, just in a huge way, that quicker turnaround has made what used to be more or less an even split in the course to being a negative split turnaround.
Jeff, how do single speeds factor into all the math you looked at? Do you have to throw them out?
Oh, you should certainly throw them out and maybe cut them up before you do it, just so nobody else finds it and gives it a try.
The 4.5 minutes longer, what percentile is that for, Jeff?
It's a 0.7% longer race based on time.
Mm-hmm.
And what gets really interesting is if your name happens to be Keegan Swenson, that corresponds to about 2 minutes and 40 seconds.
Right.
And if your 2022 result was 2 minutes and 40 seconds faster, you'd have done the course record.
Or if you put Albin Licata on the new course, his time is now 6:01:10, and Keegan turned to 6:01:01. So Keegan is your new record holder by 9 seconds.
Yep. Keegan, you can just send me the check right now and I'll get you the record.
I mean, as long as we're conducting that thought experiment, what if Keegan would have been been on the course that miracle year that Albin Licata had, his team working for him? That Keegan, well, you don't know, but I'm talking the 2022 Keegan would have beaten that year's Albin Licata, I don't know, by another few seconds, and there would have been yet another course record. It's just, I don't know, yeah, fun to dream.
Last year, Keegan did so much of it alone, right? Whereas that group was working together. If Keegan had stayed his nose out of the wind for a lot longer, who knows?
Well, we've discussed this before, and that is that Keegan had, other things in mind, namely the Grand Prix. And if he doesn't go on the attack and leave those guys, he risks the win. And he doesn't want to do that. He wants the points. Primarily, he's looking for points there. And the way to secure points is to get out there and dump those other people and move on with the game, which he was totally capable of doing. And he did so. And it probably cost him the record, though, his tactic. Or maybe not. Maybe if we just do the math, he's got the record.
Keegan also had Steamboat the next day, so maybe he was holding a little bit back because he had another big race the next day.
One thing I like about the current setup, though, a new course being slightly slower, is that anybody who does set the record won't have people chirping at him saying, well, you got it on an easier course. I think they'll have gotten it on a harder one.
So the 0.7%, to get back to that, just applies across the board. No matter who you are, Jeff, that's the factor you should use. If you've got an old time, say you're coming back to Leadville. For me, my last race there, I can't remember, 2016 or whatever it was, I would say, okay, 0.7%, that's kind of what I'm looking at.
I think it'll work that way. To really dive into it, you'd want to look at all the racers, every percentile position. As it is, I'm picking a couple of arbitrary cuts, and it may be that if I'd picked the 9th percentile or the 11th percentile instead of the 10th, I might get a different outcome. So I think it's order of magnitude true. I don't think you're going to go to 2% or 3% or 5% different, but it could vary around that.
Comment real quickly on the sample size of the new course. Do you think more runs are needed? Could that swing it in the favor of the new course being actually faster? It
might, but I wouldn't expect so. And for every new course run that you add, you have to really think about an old course run to add into the mix, so you've got comparable numbers. And now you are starting to get into a case where not as many people were on lightweight full suspension bikes, or people's nutrition plans weren't dialed in. So I think it would help, but it's just always going to be hard to compare a 2025 to a 2015 or a 2005.
Looking at the data in my website, I'm looking at Eldon's 2019 finish, and that was on the old course, right?
Yeah.
That's an 8:38.18. So adjusted for the new course, it's much better. So you should take that into account when you're looking at your PRs.
I'm just hearing much better, and that's all I care about. So in the end, 1% is an easy way to round it up, right? And so if I'm just doing quick sort of mental math here. So if you are targeting 12 hours and you've done that before, 12 times 60, that's 720, 1% of that. If you are a 12-hour racer, that is 7.2 minutes, right? 7 minutes and 17 or something seconds, right? So it is not, it is a little bit more time that you need to plan in for your race. If you've done this before and you've done it is that 1% as meaningful as a stiff headwind? Is it as meaningful as not eating properly? Is it as meaningful as really practically anything? No. It's honestly a little bit of an amazing magic trick that they were able to adjust the course this much. And it is some pretty significant course adjustment, and still have it be within, as you're describing it, 1% of the finish times. That's pretty amazing.
I think that's exactly right.
Unless you're Keegan. That's exactly right.
Well, I'm doing a quick check. Nope, none of us is Keegan. Jeff, Mark, it has been a real pleasure having you on. It's fantastic having a couple of super nerds on the show.
It's been great being here. Thanks so much for the opportunity.
Yep, we appreciate it.
Again, big thanks to Jeff Dieffenbach and Mark Wolfgang. Jeff has written columns on all three of these topics he discussed, and you can find those at dieffenbach.wordpress.com. We will also include links to that in our show notes because I don't know about you, but I couldn't spell it right the first time. And like Mark had said, his race predictor can be found at www.ltracepredictor.com.
And since our recording, Jeff has done a little more math on this subject, specifically the White Corral.
Of course he has.
I know. That sub-9 rate from the White Corral is 1.5%. By comparison, the rest of the field is big buckling at a rate of 20%.
Wow, 20%. That's higher than I would have guessed. The sub-12 rate from the White Corral is 54%. 85% of the rest of the field finishes sub-12. If you want to divide that up even further, get even more granular, 61% of the White Corral 1 had a sub-12 finish rate. The combined White Corral 2 and 3 had a 48% sub-12 rate. And honestly, Hadi, this 13% delta is the only stat that really surprised me. Maybe people really did self-seed honestly into those 3 White Corrals, or maybe the people who took the extra effort and time to get into the first White Corral wanted to sub-12 a little bit more. There's no way to know, but it's an interesting question.
Yeah. Like we said in the interview, the White Corral is going to have a broader talent pool in it and experience range. So success rates and calculations should be considered with that in mind. Ultimately, what all this math says, and what this episode says, is yes, you can succeed from the White Corral, especially if you're just looking to finish.
Yeah, thanks again to Jeff and Mark for all their hard work on this topic. If you have a question about this or anything Leadville related, please send it our way, and maybe we'll make it part of our LFAC segment. We are going to be even doing a whole LFAC show. Yes, a whole episode devoted to your questions later in this episode, or later in this season.
Yep, LFACs can be thrown our way on our Slack channel, leadville.fm/Slack. And of course, there's the Facebook Leadville 100 Mountain Bike Participants page where Fatty and I are always on the lookout for topics and questions. If you like the show, go to wherever you listen, give us a 5-star rating, and write a review. And to see all the ways you can find this independent show, it's leadville.fm.
Good luck in your riding, your racing, and your recovery. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you at the starting line.